the spirit of it. Like being in a place where you can tell God's welcome. You know, it's a tough world out there right now. There's a lot of things going on in the world that as Christians we just can't. Well, it's just hard to sit back and watch it. God never intended our world to get in such a state, but He told us many times that it would, and that we would go through a lot of trials in the process. Those of you that like to follow along, we'll start off in Zechariah chapter 13. I've got one verse there, and I've got a couple others in other places that I'll get to, but I want to start off with that first. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 9. The Bible says, "And I will bring a third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call upon my name, and I shall hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God." And you know, when you sit down and you look at a lot of the things that we go through, we really kind of wonder, can I take this much heat? You know, when God told Zechariah that a third of the people would go through a fire, they'd be refined like silver, tried like gold. Back a long time ago, back when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth, and I was in college my first time. I think sometimes my kids think that that's about how old I am. But when I graduated from high school in 1982, I went to college at a university that was close to where I lived. I was really into industrial arts stuff, woodworking, all that kind of thing. One of the classes I had, we were doing some metal work. And one of the things we had to do was we had to make a chisel. Took a piece of steel and we turned that thing into a regular chisel like you'd use for metal and stuff. That was one of our grades for the first semester. And I learned a lot about how to put things through fire and try it and temper it, make it where it's strong. And when I was in high school too, we had our woodworking department, our industrial arts thing, we were able to buy a furnace to melt metal. And so we were casting things out of aluminum cans like it was going out of style. Every time we turned around, we were coming up with something new to do this, just to learn some of this stuff. And there's a lot of things you can learn from taking metal and heating it up and melting it. You can learn that if you're not careful, it'll burn you. If you're careless in what you're casting, it won't turn out right. We would take a pattern or something and we'd form out this, whatever it was we wanted to cast into a piece of metal, and we'd put it in a sand cast. And it's basically the same type of sand you'd find in a play pit, just a good old play sand. And it had to be a certain amount of moisture in it so that it would work, so it would hold it together. Too much, and what you were casting would turn out wrong. Not enough, and it would fall apart. The mold would just collapse. And as we got practicing on this, as we learned to do this, things got better. What we would cast in this aluminum would get better. better quality, it'd hold up better, it'd look better. When we pull it out, we'd be able to clean it up and shine it up real good, and things would look good. But you got to remember too, it was just aluminum. Now, aluminum is a very convenient metal to have. It makes great soda cans. It does real good for a lot of smaller things, but when things start getting a little more requirement, you've got to put a little more effort into it. You know, most cars now, if it's not got fiberglass in it, it's got aluminum somewhere. There's a lot of aluminum parts that used to be made out of steel, and to save weight. Probably everybody's car out in the parking lot has got aluminum wheels on it. And I worked in an aluminum wheel plant in Johnson City there for a while until it shut down. But you have to have a certain amount of strength. And so when you put things through fire, you can strengthen it. You can purify it. You can strengthen it. Zechariah, the silver and the gold were going to run through metal, or through the fire. And all the impurities would come up to the top. And you scrape it off. Same thing happens with most other metals. The impurities float to the surface. And you know, that's the thing about the gospel. When we go through the fire of the gospel, when we get tried by God, the impurities tend to come to the top. If we're not true, those bad things will come to the surface. When we go through those tough times, that's when your character begins to show. You know, that's one of the things about what Zechariah was telling us here. Was it we'd be refined like silver. The heat, the pressure, those different things that put us on trial, that test our spirit, and brings the bad to the surface. See, once it comes to the surface, it can be removed. You know, we don't start off when we get saved as being perfect Christians who are free of sin and mistakes. See, when we get saved, we're forgiven, so that those impurities, that things that we need to get rid of, can be brought to the surface. In Job chapter 23, verse 10, it says, "But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold." See, God has a way of putting that refining, getting it to the point where we can be tried. We can be given those things that God sees as needful for us to learn to grow as Christians. One of the most important things for us to remember is that being a Christian isn't about being perfect. It's about doing the things that God would have us to do. To be able to grow, to be able to do the things that will bring glory to His name and increase the kingdom of heaven. God doesn't look at us as commodities or just tools to use, but as a resource to bring glory to His name. A resource that has a heart and a soul. A resource that responds to love and responds to discipline. We need to remember as Christians that discipline is very important. We need to remember that we can't have just a free pass on everything in the world that happens. A friend of mine had posted a story about a lady who was a school teacher that worked at a school that the school had what was called a no-zero policy. The absolute minimum grade that could be given for anything was a 50%. She had some students that didn't do the work. And instead of getting 50, they got a 0. Because they didn't do the work and they didn't turn it in. And they fired her. And I had commented back that that was pretty sad. It sounds like more like the school and the parents are the ones that needed the zeros. In our house, our kids realize that we have a policy that maybe goes beyond what the school is. You do the work, we'll help you any way we can, but we won't do the work for you. And if you don't get it done, you suffer the consequences. See, that's one of the important things we need to understand about our relationship with God through Christ is we are responsible for our actions. We may be forgiven what we've done, but it does not change the fact that we are responsible for what we do. We have to be accountable as Christians to God, to each other, and to ourselves for the actions that we take. That's why God tries us with fire. That's why God lets us go through difficult times so that we can grow, so that we can be refined, so that we can be tried and come out like gold, so that we can come out being what God needs us to be. It's as much for our own benefit as it is for God's benefit. God doesn't do anything with us, through us, that does not benefit us and himself. God doesn't frivolously hand out tasks to do, saying, you need to do this because I'm too busy. God's never too busy for us. God is always there. God is always at a spot where he can help us with what we need help with, as long as we're willing to come to him and ask for that help. 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 9, says, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. So that's the one thing. We get tried like gold, but we've got to remember that gold can be destroyed. You can render it to a point where it is no longer of any value. Most people don't realize that. Because we look at gold and we see something that's enduring, that has a value to it. And if you ever look at the price of gold and watch it for any length of time, you can tell it goes up and down a little bit, but it remains valuable. But gold can be reduced to a point where its value is lost. But that's not what happens with God. God doesn't look at us and say, I've used this person to the point where they're no longer of value to me. God never does that. God cannot use us to the point where we become invaluable to him. Because we hold value to him because of his Son. No matter what we do as Christians, and we do it in the name of God, and not just doing it in the name of God to say, oh, well, I'm doing that in the name of God, but doing things that God wants us to do, needs us to do, brings value. It brings value to God because we have been first obedient to his will. We have sought to do those things that will bring glory to God, to his kingdom. So when it says in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7 there. Though it be tried with fire, it might be found unto praise and glory, honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. And in verse 8 it says, whom having not seen ye love, in whom, though we see him not, yet believing, ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. See, God puts value in us because of his Son. Because we, not seeing him, found him to be valuable to us. You know, you go look for a new car, you're looking at it, you look at all the things about it, and you find it to be a valuable thing. But could you imagine having someone just tell you about a car? Oh, I've got this car for sale. It's this and this and this. But without seeing it, we kind of question its value. We kind of want to find out a little more about it. Just taking something at its word is not our nature. But with God, things are different. We find value in God, and all we have to do is hear about it. There's a lot of people that reject God because they can't reach out and touch him and feel him. But Christians find value in God because we heard about him. We heard about his Son. We see the results of the miracle of the salvation of Christ. We look at people we know who have become Christians before we did, and we look at their character, the way they behave, the things they say, the things they do, and we begin to see that there is value in what they have. And we find out about God. And we find out that that value is something that can't be put into words alone, but can't be seen just simply because we want to see it. We find that faith does more to bring salvation to our lives than anything else. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 9, it says, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. And we need to remember that what God has done for us, he did simply because he loved us. The end of our faith is the salvation. Now, when you sit there and you think about that just a minute, salvation is the first thing we do to begin a relationship with God. When we get saved, that's the beginning of our faith. But in 1 Peter, it also tells us that the end of our faith is the salvation of our souls. That may seem strange. There's a reason for it, though. See, God is something that most people overlook. The Bible tells us God is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. See, everything that we have in our relationship with God comes through salvation. The salvation that caused him to send his Son so that we would be able to have that relationship with him. Everything we need is through God. It comes by way of his Son, who was born of a virgin, who went to the cross and died there and rose again, so that we would have fulfillment of that salvation. We know that the sin of the world is the thing that causes us to need salvation, we know that Christ is the reason why we have it. That one act fulfilled has done more than any other act ever done. Even the creation of the world pales in comparison to Christ giving his life for our salvation. If the world had been created and Christ had never come, then what would it be? Do we have a world where turmoil will constantly grow? Even the salvation that Christ brought to us is so important that when you sit down and you look at this, a couple of important things that have taken place in the world. With God commanding Noah to build the ark, it was all based on the need for us to have salvation through Christ. Moses bringing the children out of Egypt, it's all tied to the salvation that Christ brought to us. There are just steps in how God tries us through fire. That God makes for us an opportunity to become better than what we are. Back in Zechariah 13:9, again, the beginning of that verse, it says, "And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I shall hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God." And we think about that in a very important way. That no matter what happens, God does not abandon us. God does not reject us out of hand because we've made a mistake. We all make mistakes. Usually mine start about the time I actually get out of bed. And I don't know that they ever stop. We're not perfect. God didn't make us perfect. God made us in his image, lacking that perfection that he has, so that we would strive to be closer to him. This is one of the key reasons why Christ came. So we knew that we would never measure up to God. Even the angels had that fault as well. They knew they weren't as perfect as God. Some tried. Some believed they were. But God made us just a little less than perfect. The reason was quite simple. That way we would know we needed to be with him. That way we knew that we would need a salvation. We would need a Savior. We would need somebody who would be willing to go to a cross and take on not their own guilt, but ours, so that we can grow and become closer to God. So that's the relationship we have with Christ. We're willing to accept who Christ is and what Christ has done for us. Then we begin to understand just how important our need is. We will seek out those things that Christ has for us. Excuse me. We would seek out the salvation that Christ can provide. And I understand that we get and become tried like gold because we're willing to go through the fire that Christ can give for us. It's not a fire meant to destroy, but a fire meant to strengthen, to refine, to bring out the impurities, and to make us shining as gold, a substance we put value on here. I've often said to people, I've said, think about it, we value gold so much here, but in heaven it's the pavement. Now, I don't know about you, but when you go outside and you look at the roads and around, there's always usually a pothole. There's patches in different places. Sometimes the road's not wide enough. But God built a city where the whole city is paved with gold. You have to think something is as abundant that God can create streets of it, but we still have value in it here. It must be something that God can work with. I've known people that do some work with jewelry and things. Gold is one of those things that's both difficult and easy to work with. If gold's too soft, it bends too easy. If it's too hard, has too many other types of metal in it, it tends to not look as good. It tarnishes over time. See, God doesn't use substitutes in his gold. It's strong enough to be pavement in heaven, and soft enough here for us to be molded in the way that God would have us to be molded. Gold is one of those substances that is used for many different things. God uses it to show us we have value, that we can be made pure, and that we can go out and spread the wealth of his word to other people. The thing you have to understand is that as Christians, there are times we're going to go through fire. We're going to have some trials that we're going to go through. There may be times when, like the silver being refined, some of the impurities come out. We have to spoon them off so that we're not dealing with those impurities in our lives. But in the end, we'll have value like gold that God gave us because he allowed us to go through some trials in our lives. God doesn't put us through trials to be mean, to be hateful, or neglectful, but rather to purify us, strengthen us, make us like that chisel I made when I was in college. Something that'll do a job and hold up to it. Started off as just a metal bar. It could be easily bent. You put it in a vise and bend it. After a while, after working with it, strong, it had an edge, and it could be used. Something we need to remember as Christians, that God expects us to get tempered, become stronger, and develop an edge that will cut through the sin of the on it.